when governments and others badly let down the people in their country, there are always eruptions, and you have to deal with them. In America, there's the protection of the First Amendment, and that has, by the way, a palpable effect on the discourse, including on the media discussion in the US, which is far less scared, I think, than most of the British media is, of dealing with, tricky people, difficult subjects.
In Russia last year, 400 people were arrested for things that they said on social media.
Maybe there are some people in Britain who think this increasing policing of what people say is a good thing. I would just point out that, nobody knows where the brakes are on that car.
How many people do you think were arrested in Britain for things they said on social media last year?
Go on.
Take a guess.
I have no idea.
3,300.
Really? Arrested for what they'd said on social media?
Yeah.
There are horrific and horrible things that people have passed around online. There are also things that are untrue. This, however, gets to something which is very interesting to me about the modern British political discourse, which is it never addresses primary problems. It always deals with reactive issues.
Douglas Murray discusses the current state of free speech in Britain, particularly in light of recent riots and subsequent sentencing of individuals for online hate speech.
28-year-old man has been jailed for 20 months in Leeds for stirring up religious hatred online during the riots across the country.
He highlights the contrasting American perspective on free speech, noting that many Americans are shocked by the limitations imposed in the UK.
He said every man and his dog should smash expletive out of Britannia Hotel. He also said that asylum seekers are here given a life of Riley off the tax us hard-working people earn when it could be put to better use. Come here with no work visa, no trade to their name, and sit and doss.
I think that actually one of the things that's happening, as I mentioned in my column, is that there is a genuine concern and an understandable concern from the authorities that these riots in recent weeks were actually not coordinated. They were ground up. They were not ordered by some Führer-like figure in the UK scene. They happened, and they happened out of, obviously, rage, and then led into, among other things, reprehensible criminality. But this tendency to go, as I say, for things like let's police speech is just such a typically modern British thing. There's no evidence that there was anything to do with an online harms issue. It's what the British police and political class think they can always come down on speech, always talk about the terrible internet, always talk about the terrible freedom of expression that people are exercising. I think it's a demonstration of their own failure to deal with primary issues and their own sort of eunuch-like status on so many things.
I'm going to be arrested for posting on Facebook.
Some comments that are offensive, obscene, and people have made a complaint about that, and it's translated.
Can you tell me what this comment was?
Okay, well, we'll do that when we interview.
All right.
It's the loveliest day's policing, of course, is to sit at your desk eating a digestive biscuit and a cup of coffee and scrolling through Twitter to find if a woman somewhere in Doncaster has liked something that she shouldn't have done on Twitter.
Douglas Murray's analysis presents a sharp critique of government negligence in the UK and its ripple effects on society, focusing on rising unrest and political accountability. He rejects the dominant narrative that frames such unrest as evidence of an organized far-right movement, contending that this perspective distorts reality and vilifies law-abiding citizens voicing legitimate concerns. Murray delves into the socioeconomic consequences of mass migration, particularly its impact on working-class communities. He underscores how job displacement and cultural tensions are often dismissed or overlooked by political leaders, which he interprets as a betrayal of the very people they are meant to serve. This neglect, he argues, exacerbates feelings of alienation and frustration among those who bear the brunt of these changes. He also criticizes the left for abandoning traditional labor issues, leaving the working class without effective representation. Instead of addressing the tangible challenges posed by migration and integration, many on the left vilify those who raise these concerns, further isolating vulnerable communities and deepening societal divides. Murray's commentary calls for a re-evaluation of priorities and a more honest dialogue to address these pressing issues.
There are a bunch of groups in the UK who make their money from saying they are anti-fascist. By the way, all of these groups behave in very fascistic ways themselves, it should be noticed. But it's also always been the question that I've had in Britain, certainly since the destruction of the BNP, is who are you tilting against? Who are you running against? And the answer was, for a long time for these groups, was that the bogeyman of the far right had basically been certainly seen off from British politics. But what they did was they continued to raise money about it, continued to scare people about it, and moved the barrier of where far right should be said to be just further and further, closer and closer into the political mainstream. They're fighting a sort of phantom bogeyman, and you can see they're desperate to have their Cable Street moment. They're desperate for that, these people. They have non parasan they hold up, as if Oswald Mosley's British Union of Fascists might be just lurking around the corner and about to come and do a parade. It's preposterous. If a white working class person is upset about anything, let alone a large number of white working class people, bang, far right, like that. No way to express anger, frustration or anything else without being deemed to be far right. I think this is a big mistake that the political class and the media in the UK have made. And the media who've been willing to suck up to that should realize that all these people, all these fake anti-fascists, all of whom have very dubious histories themselves, all of these fake anti-fascist groups tilting at this fascist enemy are staggering around the land looking for fascists to identify. They will come for whoever is in their way and make these charges against them. They are totally unscrupulous. They are tin can waving money raisers and total frauds. And I wish more people called that out. When governments and others badly let down the people in their country, there are always eruptions, and you have to deal with them. Would hope that the British government would, like any other government, and stop people being intimidated in their homes and much more. One of the problems about mobs is that they don't know how to behave, rather obviously, and they direct themselves onto just whatever is in front of them. I think that this attempt to use that as a way to claim that Britain has some kind of organized far right is a real mistake. It's a category error. I think also it's just extremely unfair to people who are not violent, the ones who are not violent and never did anything violent, but are deeply worried about what has happened to their communities and their country. Obviously, there is no place for the violence. What if you are anti the violence, but you desperately want to make your voice heard in some way? Are you allowed to even protest in the UK anymore without the Antifa groups claiming that you're a fascist for doing so? What are you allowed to do exactly if you're white and working class and live in an area like Southport and don't like some of the things that have gone on recently? What are you allowed to do? The answer is you're allowed to vote every 5 years. Great. And what's the result of that? Nothing. Nothing for a quarter of a century. If you voted, for instance, against mass migration for a quarter of the century, you have voted and had your vote completely ignored. So the political class should not think that the great panacea to this is to say to people, once every 5 years, you're allowed to express yourself at the ballot box. There are lots of ways of expressing yourself. And I just deeply worry that now any political expression, online or off, by somebody who does not like the direction of their country, is going to be deemed to be far right and part of this fascist movement that, as far as I can see, does not exist in the UK.
Douglas Murray's reflections highlight a pressing concern: the right to raise difficult questions about migration, integration, and political accountability without being unfairly labeled or dismissed. Open dialogue is the cornerstone of a free society, yet many feel silenced or vilified for expressing legitimate concerns. How can we protect freedom of expression while fostering constructive, inclusive debates on these critical issues? Thank you for being part of this discussion. Please share your perspective in the comments. If you found this thought-provoking, share it with others and help expand the conversation.